Hey, it's the week one free agency review. It's the FTN Fantasy Schatz and Tanier NFL podcast for Thursday, March 13th, 2025. I'm Aaron Schatz from FTN Fantasy. He's Mike Tanier from the Two Deep Zone Substack at twodeepzone.substack.com. No, MikeTanier.substack.com. That's right.
Yes.
But if you search for Two Deep Zone Substack, you'll get it too. We are not the college basketball super show.
I was ready to talk bracket busters and bubble teams and strength of schedule. Let's go.
I am going to admit I don't know how to get rid of the thing on the bottom that says that you're watching the college basketball super show. So it's got a code though. It's got a code for a discount on FTN Fantasy. If you're not a subscriber yet for some reason, there's a promo code that gets you 20% off. And I believe that the VIP Plus package gets you all the DVOA stuff. Plus, it gets you all kinds of March Madness picks and all of our baseball stuff just in time for baseball season and all of our golf stuff and all of that. So we're going to just leave that little thing at the bottom and hope that people will subscribe to FTN because that's why we're here in the first place.
It's college basketball season anyway. Join up, get your brackets ready, get ready for the real March Madness next week. Although this week's March Madness is pretty good.
This is good because the NFL kind of covers the early March Madness, right? Mm-hmm. Like free agency covers all the time up until about when brackets are announced. So it kind of works like that.
Right. If you don't care about who wins the Patriot League, if you're not invested in that or investing in that, you can wait. Free agency comes, it kind of dies down. Here comes the real tournament.
Although my favorite thing is that apparently Drake won their league and Lamar won their league. So there's a possibility that there's going to be a Drake-Lamar matchup.
Yeah, I don't know. Tournament. I don't know how I would bet that because, like, normally
you can't bet on Drake. It's all Lamar these days.
Right, but maybe college basketball is bizarro world of the hip-hop world, and it's the opposite.
That's possible. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, of course. MLB draft season is here, and the easiest place to play fantasy baseball is at Underdog Fantasy. Be active in their best ball fantasy draft formats. You draft your team over 20 rounds, and the best score of the team you drafted becomes your score every week of the baseball season. Drafts are constantly filling each and every day. To go to Underdog Fantasy right now, it is only $10 to draft in one of their dinger drafts, and the tournament closes on opening day, which I believe is March 27th. Sign up for Underdog and use promo code FTN to get your first deposit matched up to $1,000, I believe. So use promo code FTN, join Underdog Fantasy today, and you got all of baseball season, and then you've got football season in just a few months. We do it all, underdogfantasy.com. Of course, we're live on when we do this show, which is irregularly in the off season, but it is right now. So feel free to ask us all kinds of questions about free agency. We are here for you. Mike, what was your favorite move of free agency week so far?
Probably re-signing Josh Allen by the Buffalo Bills. I would put that number one, and I would say 1B maybe would be the Laramie Tunsil trade by the Commanders on the Commanders side of things. Although I recognize some of the skepticism about how much Tunsil really has left and how good he really was last year, you're not going to get an offensive lineman as good as him anywhere else in this current cycle. There's not one in the draft. There wasn't one in free agency once Stanley was gone, and you get an upgrade that I think the Commanders needed, even if people didn't think they needed it.
My favorite move was Joey Bosa.
Okay, Bills.
Like, I don't think Joey Bosa is not necessarily the great edge rusher that he was in his earlier years, but if he stays healthy, he's a very good edge rusher. And the strategy of Buffalo of let's get as many edge rushers as possible and just go after Patrick Mahomes nonstop seems to be a good strategy. Right. They added my man Michael Hoyt, my fellow Brown graduate, as well. Hopefully they won't draft him and drop him into coverage as much as the Rams did. But I like the Bosa move. I think that is a really great move for Buffalo. And as far, I think it's a good move for Bosa too, because people talked about him wanting to be back with his brother in San Francisco and that there was interest from Miami. I think Buffalo gives him the best chance to win a ring.
It gives him the best chance of a championship. He's an upgrade over Von Miller, who had pretty much nothing left. Bosa has something left. And you're right. You get Michael Hoyt. You get Bosa. They re-signed Greg Rousseau. They re-signed DeMar Hamlin. You know, like all of these little, we have to retain these guys move. They've managed to retain a lot of those guys, a very high percentage of those guys, while adding somebody who, you're right, we saw the Super Bowl. Get after Mahomes as much as possible. See if the Chiefs can fix their offensive line and that they don't hit them with waves and waves of guys.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we talk about the most head-scratching signing, and this is not the one that I picked as my most head-scratching signing, but it is fairly head-scratching, which is Jalen Moore, the backup left tackle from the 49ers, getting big money from the Chiefs to be their new starting left tackle with very little track record.
Very little track record. He does a couple of games a year in replacement of Trent Williams, and he has not been a problem. He has not been the problem in those games by far. But then you have to start asking questions. You know, schematically, what can Kyle Shanahan do to protect the backup left tackle and make him like viable in these games? And the answer with Kyle Shanahan is he can do a lot of things. They can run the ball, they can keep extra tight ends in, do all these other things to protect this guy. He's not going to that kind of system in Kansas City.
My most head-scratching move of free agency is Eric Murray to the Jacksonville Jaguars for 3 years and $19.5 million, including $12 million guaranteed. Eric Murray has only been a starter 1 out of the last 3 years. He was injured for most of 2023. He was not a starter in 2022. He's like 31 years old. I'm not sure he's really a starting quality safety. They gave him a lot of money and it's not to get younger. No. I know that defense is what the Jaguars needed because they were 31st in defensive DVOA last year, but yeah, I don't quite get that one.
I don't quite get the Jaguars' entire offseason thus far. Yeah. I know this very young man just got the job, you know, like 18 hours before he took the podium at the combine. And I kind of anticipate, well, if you're coming into this process very late, maybe you don't spend a lot of money. But the Jaguars have spent a lot of money. And I'm not sure who they got.
They got Jordan Lewis.
Okay.
That's a good nickel.
Yes.
They got Patrick McCarry, who's a very versatile offensive lineman, can play all 5 positions.
I'm trying to remember.
And then they got some guys.
They got some guys. Diami
Brown is a guy.
They got a lot of guys. Now, if you're going for a
tight ends,
who'd they get at tight end?
Johnny Munt and Hunter Long. They're guys. They're football players. Johnny Munt is a blocker. Hunter Long is more of a receiver. They're guys, you know.
They're guys. A lot of expensive guys. And if you were really like looking to get safeties in this market and you had money to spend, safeties went all over the place. You get these Trevor Mooring type guys that have moved all around the league. I don't know why you're dealing from the bottom of the deck if you're going to spend that money. I got a head scratcher though. Why did the Eagles trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson for the worst of the 2 K Green offensive linemen of the Houston Texans?
You'll have to tell me. I understand why they would trade for Green because you got a guy with a good pedigree and you've got Jeff Stoutland.
Yeah, okay. Right.
Why you traded C.J. Gardner-Johnson and not a 7th round pick, I don't know.
Because C.J. Gardner-Johnson is good in very small doses in terms of like his personality and how long you can sort of put up with it.
Is that a thing with the coaches or is that a thing with his teammates?
It's coaches. It's his keeping his head in the game when he's out there. I mean, there's a reason he keeps bouncing from team to team and back to the Eagles and then go on and back and then off to another team, etc. So I feel like they're probably getting ahead of a potential headache in that case. I guess, you know, hey, Mekhi Becton, we just sort of fixed him. Now we can fix this guy. It's just, I don't know. Like if you're saying, I had the opposite way. If you're trading CJ DJ, maybe you can get
something better,
something a little bit better off the other end. That's one of them. Although that did prevent the Cowboys from going out and trading for Green because every failed prospect in the NFL from like 2018 to 2021 is now playing for the Cowboys. Some of them were traded for, like Kyer Elam.
And Kenneth Murray.
Who seems every team wants to take one toke off of Kenneth Murray and see if his fast in a straight line thing turns into like NFL player thing.
Bill Houston, I don't know if you read your column today, says, due to the cap, I'm confused how the Saints will field a complete team next year, let alone participate in free agency. Mike actually wrote all about this today at his Substack, and they did participate in free agency. They went out and signed Justin Reed to prove that they could sign somebody. But, I mean, take it away, Mike. They're a mess.
I think Bill read it, and that's why he's confused. I'm confused after reading it, how they did it. But it's a mess. You know, when you start looking at, like, the Ryan Ramczyk situation, and Ryan Ramczyk can't play anymore. He can't play football anymore. But what they have done is that they've taken his contract and rewritten it, and, like, not just a restructure, rewrote it, so that Ryan Ramczyk is making the league minimum this year so that they can amortize some of his old bonus money this year. So Ramczyk is going to retire, but I think he's going to count $12 million against the salary cap for the New Orleans Saints. A bigger thing was Derek Carr. Most teams in this league are looking at Derek Carr level players and saying, how can we get away from this? How can we move on from this? The Saints actually tried to get Carr to take a pay cut, which was not going to happen. It's not realistic. So they're keeping Derek Carr. Derek Carr's 2026 cap number is currently $69 million. And Carr's not good. He's not good at football. So if you look all across
football. Okay, I'm going to just defend Derek Carr for a little bit.
Yes.
Derek Carr, despite what people think of him, constantly comes out with slightly above average production numbers. Now, does that mean he's worth the money they're paying him? Probably not. Does it mean he's worth that cap hit? Definitely not. Yeah. Does it mean he'll still be that good in 2 years, given that he's aging? Probably not. But Derek Carr's production is constantly better than what people tend to think of him.
He keeps looking good, I say statistically, and having series of games where he's playing relatively well.
Right.
In between an ever-increasing amount of injuries.
Yes.
And we have this ever-decreasing threshold where we know he's going to max out as a guy who can maybe get you 9 wins if he plays.
He maxes out as like the 10th best quarterback in the league, but now that he's 34, that's probably like the 12th best quarterback in the league. And you don't have any. I mean, you have Chris Olave, I guess, but you don't. What else do you have? The Saints are a mess.
Right. They pretty much have to retain Taysom Hill right now. Taysom Hill tore an ACL last year in the middle of the season. I have no idea what his status is going to be. They're going to field a 53-man roster, but they've built this thing where the ceiling keeps falling. And you can get fooled again by the fact that they still have these names like Alvin Kamara and Tyrann Mathieu.
I think at this point, nobody's fooled unless they're fooling themselves.
Yeah, or you're fooling yourself. Like you remember the name, like, well, that team could be pretty good. That team can win 6 games at absolute premium prices. But I did write about this. I talked about how this should end after next year because some of these guys are flat out retiring. And the guys that they extended this year, besides Carr, weren't like these massive 36-year-old with like a $60 million cap number. They're now like extending like these smaller tier guys where the extension won't hurt them as much.
All right. What is going on in Seattle?
What
is your feeling about what is going on in Seattle? Because, Geno Smith out, Sam Darnold in, DK Metcalf out. So it's basically now just Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't really take Marquez Valdez-Scantling seriously as a starter.
He was a Saints starter last year.
They've added some defense. I mean, they added DeMarcus Lawrence when they already had pass rushers. So they have a lot of pass rushers now, but what's your feeling about the Sam Darnold for Geno Smith exchange?
I was hoping you could explain it to me because I felt like Geno wanted a new contract, so they traded him. Now, by the way, he still doesn't have that new contract unless I missed something in the last 3 hours.
No, I don't think he does, but people think that the Raiders are going to give it to him. I don't think they did, but the report was that they were going to.
Yeah, that's where you have a novice general manager and a non-general manager, and you don't realize you should be bundling the contract extension directly with the trade because for leverage purposes. Anyway, the Seahawks. So I thought, this is just going to be a clean slate rebuild. And then they bring in Darnold at a pretty high rate.
I think their feeling is Darnold is younger and that he's shown what he can do in an offense of this style, right? Because the Seahawks now have a Kubiak, one of the, I don't remember which of the two Kubiak sons they have, but that's going to be a similar offense to what O'Connell runs in Minnesota. And he doesn't have Jefferson and Addison, but he does have Smith-Njigba and I guess Noah Fant. I mean, in the offensive line, Nate Tice pointed out the Minnesota offensive line was not as good as you might think in the second half of the year. So it's not like that much of a decline in the offensive line to go from Minnesota to Seattle. But yeah, I feel like they're set up for Sam Darnold to disappoint people.
Right. And just as Geno Smith had sort of a charmed year for the Seahawks and they paid him for it. And it's like, you just paid at peak. You paid for the peak, and now you get the decline. You didn't break the bank for him, frankly, but you sort of committed to that little bit of a decline. There's a chance you're paying for the decline right now from Darnold having this charm season he had in Minnesota. And yeah, you're right. The offensive line, it was very wobbly late in the year, especially in the interior. The Vikings have just addressed that by bringing in some guys. But they also had Jefferson and Addison and Andrew Jones and a sort of locked-in system where it's like, well, we can operate within the structure. We can slow pass rush with play action, et cetera. I don't know if you can do that with Jackson Smith and Jigba and whoever you get in the draft to actually be your vertical threat, because MVS is not in 2025 a vertical threat.
You went through on your Substack the teams that you liked what they did in free agency. So I'm going to go through those 4 teams here because it's interesting. It's very different from Kevin Cole's improvement index.
Okay.
Part of that is, we'll get to Kevin Cole's improvement index in a second, is that Kevin Cole's improvement index being very numerical. The best teams in the improvement index are teams that sucked last year.
Yeah, right.
Because those are the teams that are going to improve the most. But okay, the teams that you liked, I'm going to go from 4 to 1. Buffalo.
Like them even more now.
Because they extended their own players. They signed 2 edge rushers with Bosa and then Josh Palmer.
Yes, but Bosa would have been it was very late when I got the Bosa news. I would have actually moved Buffalo up from 4 based on the Bosa news. And then afterwards, the Hamlin news. And I'm missing, I mentioned, we talked about Josh Palmer, that's fine. They got someone else. Am I missing somebody? My brain is tapioca right now, but
I'm not remembering someone else that they brought in. Josh Palmer is sort of like Mac Hollins.
Well, he's more of a normal wide receiver 2 type, except that he's always hurt. Hollins is more of a wide receiver 3 and 4 and special teamer.
Yeah, guy. I guess that's probably true.
Yeah, who's never hurt. So like you get this like bonus of this guy's out there at best availability. But yeah, I love for a contender the retention of players who it seemed like they were not going to be able to keep. And Eagles fans now after this whole week has been like, oh yeah, this is a bit of a problem. Niners fans know this is a really big problem right now. The Bills have done a great job mitigating that problem. I'm vamping a little bit because I'm trying to see they got another guy I cared about. And I can't find it, so I'm not going to worry too much about
it. Number 3, you had Minnesota.
Yes.
They added Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave to their defensive line. They re-signed Byron Murphy and Aaron Jones, and they added Ryan Kelly and Will Freeze to the offensive line. Freeze is interesting. People are really big on him. Basically off 4 weeks of last year before he got hurt. There was a sense that he was improving each year, but he's never been a really great offensive lineman. I feel like people are projecting off of 4 weeks of good performance from last year.
Right. I think that's exactly it. And I originally was going to have the Vikings second or first. I forget where I was going to put them. And when I saw they put a lot of money into Freeze, and I'm like, this seems like you're getting like
But every team, they're not on an island with this. Like apparently a lot of teams were in on him.
Okay.
So a lot of scouts really believe in this guy now.
Okay. I mean, it's the wisdom of the insiders or whatever. I liked that this was a team that had a great defense, but it was a scheme-dependent defense that didn't have great defensive tackles. And you make this very measured attack. Like here comes, I'm not a big Hargrave fan either. He might be on IR now that we've mentioned his name 3 times. But you bring in Jonathan Allen, you say, now Flores can be more like, I will do these packages when I choose to, not because I'm hiding the fact that Jeremy Tillery isn't great or I've got to constantly rotate these tackles. I've got MFs I can stick in there and then really choose how I attack you.
I talked to someone from Washington at the Combine because I was curious about why Jonathan Allen was leaving. He is apparently a dick.
Okay, that's fair.
Because I asked this earlier about CJ Gardner-Johnson. I've never been in a locker room, so maybe I'm wrong about this, but in my mind, your teammates not liking you is a much bigger problem than your coaches not liking you.
Oh, yeah.
And the problem with Allen is that his teammates didn't like him.
Okay.
So I think that this could go sour for the Vikings, but my bet is that it would take more than a year for him to be a jerk and have nobody like him in the locker room, if that's the case with Allen. And so they're probably going to get a lot of good performance out of him in 2025.
Right. You wind up getting the guy on his best behavior for a while because it's a new environment and just getting to know people. And maybe, maybe Flores, gives him some of this or whatever, and he settles down a little bit. But he can play. And the defensive line record guy, I'm not as worried about that personality type of thing. I feel like that, like you said, that's cumulative, and then you get hurt, and then your teammates are like, I'm kind of sick of this, and this has been going on for 7 or 8 years of a losing tradition. It's going to be a different tradition here, so we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, Useful Title points out Allen and Daron Payne got in a fight on the Commander's sideline a few seasons ago. So that is part of the story as far as Allen goes.
Okay.
You did have the Commanders number 2 on your list. I think you're higher on their moves than I am. You like the Deebo Samuel and the Laramie Tunsil, re-signing older veterans like Ertz and Wagner, and replace John Allen with Javon Kinlaw.
That one I don't like.
I guess I'm a little more questioning of what Deebo can do at this point.
Yeah. Also a dick.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's to his teammates, but obviously he was a little bit of a locker room problem. And Ertz was remarkably refurbished last year, but I don't know how much longer that lasts. And Wagner, the same thing, right? I mean, you're making a bet that those guys don't suddenly age.
Yeah, I'm like 80% Wagner's got another year, and 35% that Ertz has got another year. But in terms of, and I think that both the Deebo and the Tunsil come with this risk. But you're at a high contendery level, and you're trying to get better, and there are these holes in your roster that you spackled over to get here. Take risks to try and add these Pro Bowlers. You're thinking you take these big swings. If you don't take these big swings and you try to add pieces there, I think your risk of backsliding is greater, and I think your possibility of staying at that NFC Championship level is weaker if you just sort of stay in your lane and see where it takes you. So that's what I liked about those moves. Is I think the risk is high, the reward is very high.
And I'll point out, by the way, that they did draft Allen's replacement last year in the second round. Oh, hello.
Jerzon. Oh, my gosh.
Somebody wants to make an appearance today. Hi.
Special guest.
Special guest Aldo. Hello, Aldo.
Hello, Aldo.
Jerzon Newton, the second-round pick.
Yes, and he can play. He can play. And Kimball's kind of a body. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, cat ass. College basketball and cat ass here on the podcast.
Down you go.
Frank the Tank is locked out of the room. We're not going to have him growling at me. He would not be visible at this range. But
your number one team you liked what they did was the Denver Broncos, and I like what Denver did too, bringing in Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga to their defense, which obviously was very, very good against the pass last year, and that these guys hopefully are good against the pass, but also improve things against the run.
Yep, and it's risk-reward high. These are both injury cases who can play at a high level when they're healthy. So there is risk-reward there. It's sort of tactical, taking that defense and finding the exact needs for it. They've added Evan Ingram since. I'm not the biggest Evan Ingram fan in the world, but he has demonstrated that when he's sort of got his situation in order, he can be a real playmaker in the middle of the field.
Bill Houston wants to know, will Kirk Cousins be traded? Why would the Falcons try to keep him when there are quarterback desperate teams?
And And they're keeping him right now, which is sort of hamstrung them cap-wise. And like,
yeah, I don't understand it either. I would let him go. If I've got to, I think I would rather have Cousins than Rodgers
oh,
if
100%.
I'm another team right now.
1,000,000 trillion %. And Grady Jarrett has left. The center Dahlman has left. There are a couple other like Falcons guys. Again, I'm very blurry right now. There's been so many transactions, but like, you know, they should be trying to retain some of these guys and move forward because it's like they should have a quarterback on a cheap contract and Penix, but they don't. So I don't know. Like if I'm the Giants, I make the phone call too. Like,
yeah, I absolutely agree. Especially because you can bring in Cousins and draft a guy.
Yeah,
you can do both.
Right.
Especially if there's the belief that Shedeur Sanders is not ready yet.
Right. That would be the 1-2 punch. Like, yeah, you play behind this guy, Shedeur, and like he's viable for a year.
So Kevin Cole, it's interesting, his improvement index, he has the number one team as the Patriots.
Right.
Now, you're not a big fan of what the Patriots have done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what you think the Patriots should have done differently.
Right.
Because my opinion is that the Patriots had a ton of cap space and they took some swings and misses on some guys, right? Like they wanted Ronnie Stanley, but Ronnie Stanley signed for less money to stay in Baltimore before free agency hit.
Right.
They wanted Chris Godwin, but Godwin took less money to go back to the Buccaneers. So they had a bunch of money, and I feel like they spent it on some reasonable players without really, really long contracts that'll hamstring them in 3 years. Like, I feel like this is better than if they had just sat on all that cap room and done nothing.
Well, first of all, you kind of answer your own question there. It's like, well, they had a plan A, and when it failed, so we're talking about a plan B.
Yeah, well, they tried the plan A. They did. They wanted Ronnie Stanley, right? They
wanted Ronnie Stanley, and like, so like there are other ways you could approach this sort of like sort of plan B type thing. You could be on the trade market, for example, and try to do things to bring in. When you're a team like the Patriots and you are in that stage of rebuilding, you should be doing what their plan A is. You identify one or two absolute difference maker guys at the high leverage positions.
Right.
And you do what you can to get them and make them building blocks for the moving forward.
I mean, apparently they did what they could, including tampering, because there's a report that the Commanders, Chiefs, and Patriots all tried to negotiate with Ronnie Stanley before he was technically a free agent. Now, this is hilarious because we know for a fact that everybody is negotiating. Everybody is tampering. Right. Otherwise, you wouldn't have deals that were announced at 12:06 on Monday.
Right.
So
that deal just got completely done.
That those three teams are now going to get hit for tampering when we know everyone's tampering all the time is sort of silly. But they were trying to get Stanley, right? Like I feel like they got stuck. Plan A didn't work. They went with plan B. I can't really fault them for that because they tried to they bid higher. They bid higher than the Ravens on Stanley, and Stanley decided to stay. Because he, better chance. There's reasons to stay, better chance to win a Super Bowl. Don't have to pull your kids out of school. There's reasons to stay.
Right. And that's all true. And so, like, while you got that plan A out there and plan B is Godwin and plan C might have been a trade for Higgins or whatever, at some point you stay true to that philosophy to a degree. And if the argument now is, well, when all else fails, they just went out there and spent a lot of money, that's fine. But that's kind of what we're talking about. When all else fails, they went out and spent a bunch of money. And I guess this will change if Milton Williams turns out to be that guy.
Yeah, right. Which is interesting because, as you pointed out, he had so many more pressures in the second half of the season in the playoffs than he had ever had before.
Yes.
But I know his pressure rate was like 4th among all defensive tackles last year or something. I don't remember where that stat comes from, but I mean, I feel like it's a combination of they did what they could, and people should be a little less excited about it and more excited about what they spend their draft picks on because free agency is less important usually than the draft.
Right. And what they should be thinking in terms of is creating competition at these positions, not filling holes at these positions. So if you got Robert Spillane, like, okay, we know Robert Spillane can go out there and make tackles for a team that's trailing, et cetera, et cetera. You shouldn't be like, well, this is our solution. You should be like, well, maybe we draft somebody in the third round and that's his competition. Or maybe there's somebody on the roster and that's his competition.
Right. I mean, my biggest feeling is nobody that they sign should change their draft strategy. As far as I'm concerned, they still need everything but quarterback.
Yeah.
If they could take a corner high
mm-hmm.
and have either Carlton Davis or Gonzalez play the slot.
Right.
Like Carlton Davis should not stop them from drafting Travis Hunter.
Right.
If he's available. And I don't think that Williams should stop them from drafting Mason Graham if that's the right pick, and that they should just draft the best players they can because they're a really bad team, and that's what really bad teams should do.
If it's Hunter, they should get Hunter. If it's the defensive tackles, because I'm kind of looking at this, I know Barmore's
right. Barmore has the questions about the blood clots.
Yeah, and it seems like we're answering the question, unfortunately, with the way they're approaching these things.
Yeah,
it's not going to be a happy ending in that respect. Then the Patriots should be looking to trade down because you can get so many defensive tackles. You can move down a spot or two. If somebody is Shador hungry, et cetera, you can get an extra pick. Because if you don't get Graham, you can get Harmon. If you don't get Harmon, you can get Nolan. I've been working on my draft thing. I have the three of them together on the same tier. And it's like they're almost slightly different versions of the same guy. So you can do those things. But that's what I'm like sort of the air out of all of that money spent. When you look at it, it's kind of like, okay, Carlton Davis is starting cornerback. Milton Williams has potential upside, et cetera. And there was a lot of just temporary solutions that cost a lot of money. Guys who are around 30. I mean, Landry is around 30. The only offensive lineman that I saw you brought in,
this is like 32 or something.
Is like a 32-year-old stopgap right tackle. I kind of get it. I feel like there's other guys out there you didn't have to get on the first Monday. And that's why I came out of the gates critical of it. I was positive about the Panthers until they kind of did the same thing.
The Panthers are also high in the Kevin Cole Improvement Index. They have he has the Patriots, Bears, Panthers, Browns, and Raiders. Which makes sense. I mean, the bad teams are the teams that add the most in free agency. They're usually the teams with the most cap space. The top playoff teams in his improvement index were Tampa Bay and Washington.
So that means retention is weighted in this, which is good. Like, because Tampa Bay can't get that high without retention points for keeping.
I don't think retention is weighted, but it's also you don't lose guys, right? So you don't. Right. There's no negative from losing Godwin.
Okay.
On the bottom, he has the Jets.
Well,
as losing the most value.
They lost Rodgers. They replaced Reed with Stevens in the secondary.
That's not a good. That's
not good. That's not good.
CJ Mosley was cut.
Reddick is gone, but like Reddick over there.
I don't know what they got from him last year. I think his numbers probably don't like Justin Fields, and I don't like Justin Fields. To me, Justin Fields had in a small sample size last year was average in his fourth season.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about a guy who was very bad for 3 years and then in a third of a season was average. What more are you really expecting from him?
Right, in this tight little ball. We have to stop thinking of him, and I even wrote about him, I think erroneously, as this lottery ticket who's going to be awesome in something, and we have to start thinking more of this guy whose floor is he can kind of give you the read option type of stuff. Like kind of keep you alive for a while. And like, that's really the guy he is, not this other unicorn that we've been waiting to see and is gone, I think.
Right. He also had the Chiefs and Eagles on the bottom, which makes a lot of sense. They're the Super Bowl teams. Of course, they're going to lose some talent. That's how
Right. Right. I kind of worry about the measure the instruments element of this. It's like bad team got good, team got guys got good. I mean,
that's why I thought it was more interesting which of the good teams got
right.
Good. Right. And he agrees with you about the Commanders.
What about the poor Niners? The poor Niners.
I think that they're probably near the bottom. I don't have it right in front of me. I just wrote down like the top 5 and the bottom 5. Gotcha. I mean, they lost a lot of guys, but are the guys they lost that important? They didn't lose their important guys other than trading Debo.
I mean, I think
Juszczyk
and Afanga and Shavarius Ward, they were guys who were gone last year.
Yeah, right. They were the guys who were already injured last year.
Right. So like in playoffs, like we were shedding all these guys, but we saw the team without those guys, and that team was bad.
Right. But they'll get CMC, or they would hope to get CMC back. They would hope to get Ayuk back.
Although they're talking trade on him. Yushik is gone, which is this weird little piece that they've always gotten a lot of value out of. Kittle's great. Kittle had the greatest year he's ever had.
I think that the losses do sort of balance the improvement that they should see from guys getting healthy, to where I don't think the 49ers go back to being a top NFC team.
No.
But I think they'll be better than they were last year because they'll be healthier, but I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender necessarily.
That's it. It's like this mitigated step back. And of course, the guys they're keeping are in their 30s in a lot of cases, or McCaffrey is a running back with a long injury history now. So there's a worry coming off on that side.
All right. That does it for today's show, everybody. And a reminder, as you see on the little scroll, even though we're not talking basketball, you can get 20% off at FTN Fantasy with promo code March20 and get all your picks to make all your brackets. And make sure you're subscribing to Mike's Substack. Read the great Saints article that he wrote today. We will be back next Thursday. We'll do a week 2 free agency wrap up on Thursday, the 20th. So make sure that you are tuning in next Thursday morning at 11 a.m.
11 a.m. You watch us, turn around, turn on that college basketball tournament.
Absolutely. For Mike Tanier, I'm Aaron Schatz. That does it for today's show. We will see you next Thursday. So long, everybody.